another summit? Do you think there should be another summit?
Absolutely. I mean, you know,
wouldn't you
Richard
have to
Haas,
have more stuff nailed down before the president goes to the trouble?
No, I don't think so. And let me explain. I think a lot of old school politics are about let's get the issue solved and then let's get the two leaders together. You know, Kim Jong-un is a young guy, and what I think Donald Trump wants to do is move his ideology, and that's going to take a relationship. Earlier in your show, you had someone talking about Gorbachev and Reagan, and they developed a relationship that led to change. And I think that's what Donald Trump's doing. He's working on a relationship with this young man and young leader.
You don't think that, you know, the president really did go much more than halfway. I think any objective observer can say that. He traveled halfway around the world last summer to go to Singapore to meet this guy, did it all over again when the guy took a 2-hour train ride to get to the Vietnam summit. Yeah. And he goes 10 or 11 hours, you know. I'm just wondering, what do you get for that?
Well, I think you get a deepening relationship that hopefully, and you know, there's no guarantees here, but hopefully moves the young man's ideology a little bit. Because if we're going to get, you know, a cooperative agreement with them, if we're going to get capitalism in North Korea, it's going to take an ideologic change on the part of Kim Jong-un. And just working out the details like it's a, you know, a new NAFTA agreement and then let's talk, that's ridiculous. That's not going to work here. It's about winning a heart relationship with Kim Jong-un, and I think that's what the president's doing. He's playing chess. You've heard the expression before. He's playing chess and others are playing checkers, and I think that's exactly what's going on. He's working on a heart relationship with Kim Jong-un.
All right, we'll see. Congressman, thank you for coming in on Saturday.
Thanks,
Good seeing you. All right, well, the Dow's finally snapped that winning streak. It had gone on for 9 weeks, but in case you think you missed your cash karma moment, the guy who literally wrote the book on it says, no. All right, well, after 9 weeks, it stops. 9 straight winning weeks for the Dow, and it ended. But it's a streak that still has the Dow off to the best performance we've seen in the better part of 3+ decades. NASDAQ racing ahead as well. But these weekly changes, even if they come to a halt right now, what do you do? Do you feel that you've missed the opportunity? Market guru Dan Geltrude says, you know, you step back and you look at the fundamentals here. He talks a lot about that in Positive Financial Karma. It's a very interesting read on things. And what makes it interesting is it's not highfalutin business advice or big words and acronyms and terms that just make you think you're watching CNBC. It just speaks English, and it gets to the core of a guy who's a practicing Buddhist. So he's a little weird, but I'm telling you, he's brilliant. Dan Geltrude is his name. Positive Financial Karma is the book. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Neil.
Yeah, the Buddhism thing, I joke about it, not to joke about it, but that's part of the thinking here. Explain.
Yeah, the basic premise of Buddhism, when you talk about karma and action and reaction and that boomerang effect of the things you do, very important. But it comes down to this: it's cause and effect. Right? What's the cause and effect of all the things that happen? And if you step back and say, well, we see the effect, what caused that? And keep it simple, Neil. If we do that, we can really uncover a lot of things and be successful in a very simple way.
Well, a lot of it is very to the point advice. I mean, when it comes to losing weight, you gotta, you know, eat less, exercise more, move more, to your point. More. Now, when it comes to investing, what do you do? Because the simple take on this is, maybe stock's gotten a little rich, you hold off. What do you say?
Well, what I say is, and I talk about this in the book, keep the emotion out of it. You know, the fundamentals, Neil. What are the things that, the causes that give you the effect that you want? What's your investment strategy? Stay the course. Don't get swayed by the headlines, by all the noise. I think people in this world that we live in with immediate gratification, news constantly, 24/7, you have to step back and tune that out and say, I'm going to stick with the fundamentals.
All right, well, how do the fundamentals
apply?
apply now? If you had 9 straight weeks of Dow advances, we're off to a very strong start to the year. 9 times out of 10, that means the rest of the year is going to be strong. So there are a lot of people who just say, all right, I'm going to follow that. Well, they get in love with being in a market that's getting all this buzz and attention. What do you tell them?
Well, right now, if you're investing in NASDAQ and you see what's been happening over the last 10 weeks, you say, hey, fundamentally what I'm doing is working. But now step back and say, how long is that going to continue to work? Will that strategy stay the course? Again, noise out. Focus in on what the plan is, because clearly it's working. If you go back to December and you were paying attention to the noise, you would have panicked, pulled out and missed this run that we've had for the last couple of months.
But if you get into this run-up, you could be equally blamed for getting caught up in the froth and getting screwed all over.
Absolutely. So
why do you tell people? It depends on your time frame, right?
Right. So if you're already in, stay in, ride it, believe in the fundamentals and how you invest your money, Neil.
And that's where you get the good karma. All right, Dan Geltrude, Positive Financial Karma. He's the author of a very uncanny read on things without trying to talk way over your head. So he could never be a financial TV anchor. He could, actually. Let's take a look at the Amazon situation in New York City. Not too far from me, they were going to build a spanking new headquarters in Long Island City. That's not happening. Now, New York's governor has come out to say, Jeff, is there a way you can reconsider, please? Pretty please? After this.
Any kind of fool could say that there was something in everything about
To get Amazon to rethink splitting from Long Island City and not going ahead and nixing a building in New York. Tracy Grasco is joining us with more on that push to get them back.
Good morning, Neil. New Yorkers are known for not giving up, even being a little pushy if necessary. No exception when it comes to Amazon's HQ2 project. Yesterday, dozens of New York union leaders, local officials, business executives published an open letter in the main section of the New York Times asking Amazon to give New York City one more chance in bringing its second headquarters to the Big Apple. The letter does its best to persuade Amazon that most New Yorkers really do want the company, its 25,000 jobs, and billions in dollars in new tax revenues. It also says Governor Andrew Cuomo will take personal responsibility for the project's state approval. And Cuomo has reportedly had several conversations with Amazon executives, including CEO Jeff Bezos, since the deal fell apart. So far, Amazon has shown no signs that it's willing to reconsider. Neil?
Thank you, Tracy. Let's get the read right now from Joe Borelli, a Republican New York City councilman. They're trying. They're pulling out all the stops. So you think it'll succeed?
He's trying, and he's right to try. I mean, we shouldn't give up on the prospect of 25,000, not just jobs, but we're talking real careers for real New Yorkers. The problem the governor faces is that New York, in and of itself, is the reason why Amazon's not coming. Amazon itself isn't the problem. They're just the result of the problem. We can't be a high-tax, high-regulatory state and expect companies that don't necessarily need to be here to come here at their own will. And this type of crony
a lot of the critics of this didn't understand how business deals are made. Like Amazon was getting a $3 billion gift or something. I mean, it was going to offer $28 billion to the city and New York State, and there were credits, tax credits for that, no different than those allowed to everyday individuals.
You had a Congress member who doesn't even represent the property where this is, basically poison the well and convince New Yorkers that this was a choice somehow between $3 billion for Jeff Bezos to line his corporate pocket, which isn't true, versus $3 billion to address some of the real problems New Yorkers face. I mean, this is something that's appalling for a freshman Congress member to make. We can accept a little bit of naivety, but when it is poisoning the well and really jeopardizing the future of an entire New York neighborhood, it goes beyond that. And frankly,
something must be poisoning the well, because it's not just New York. Right now, there are similar protests going on in Virginia, where the company wanted to build and still plans to build a facility as well. But it's taken hostage the party at the same time and cost a lot of jobs.
You know, we tend to give AOC too much credit, but here we certainly shouldn't. If you look at the short history of this deal, you had local officials actually writing to Amazon and saying, please come here, we want your job. A few months later, those same people were saying that Amazon is an immoral company. The only thing between point A and point B was point C, Cortez. She came out against it, and she made those politicians scared. She's making lists in Washington amongst her freshman House colleagues. She's making lists here in New York amongst people who previously thought themselves to be progressives.
Well, you know, I don't know the story of the timeline for these councilmen and women. There were three who were not keen on this, and then Amazon said, oh, to hell with it. But I do notice that common in their argument early on, because I talked to one of the councilmen who was opposed, was that these were not going to be union jobs. So when I asked him at the time, so you would say no to thousands of jobs simply because they wouldn't be union jobs? And he effectively said, yeah.
Well, first of all, I mean, the premise is false. You saw a whole bunch of unions yesterday rather, in Governor Cuomo's open letter. You had the building trades union supporting it. They were going to build construction with union jobs. The tech industry is not known for unionizing its tech employees. This is not an industry where the employees even want to be a part of the union.
And it's going to chase away other businesses who might want to look at setting up shop in New York. I think not so now.
This type of gumboat diplomacy, where we can basically hang sticks and carrots in front of businesses at the threat of some obscure political board just eliminating their deal, this is not an environment where businesses will want to come. And if this continues the way it is, if Governor Cuomo continues running the state the way he does, we can expect more businesses to pull out.
Well, God bless him. He did try.
He did try.
To get them here, and he's trying again. But again, to your point, it's going to be an uphill battle. Joe Borelli, thank you very, very much. We should say that New York also has lost better than $2 billion in revenue prior to this even getting started, with a lot of folks, of business and otherwise, seeking out lower tax locales like Florida after this. All right, we're focused on dueling rallies. To the left of your screen, of course, the CPAC event still going on here. They're preparing to hear from the President of the United States in a little bit more than half an hour from now. On the right of your screen, Bernie Sanders in Brooklyn, New York. He's holding a rally to let folks know a little bit more about him and his personal life story. In the meantime, Ellison Barber at the White House on what we can expect out of the president at CPAC a little bit more. As I said, a half hour from now. Ellison.
Hey, Neil. Yeah, we expect to hear from President Trump in about half an hour. Typically, when he speaks at rallies, speaks to crowds of supporters, the president rarely sticks to a script. He tends to talk about things that he sees as successes in his administration. He often talks about unemployment, the economy, plans for building a wall at the southern border, and then criticizes Democrats for not supporting his agenda. Today, we don't know exactly what Mr. Trump will focus on, but there's a chance we saw hints of it when his vice president addressed the Conservative Political Action Conference yesterday. Vice President Pence focused on Democrats trying to link them to far-left ideas, telling those at the conference that Senator Bernie Sanders, a self-described Democratic socialist, is a leading presidential contender in 2020, and that the rest of the Democratic Party is following in his footsteps.
Democrats are embracing the same tired economic theories that have impoverished nations and stifled the liberties of millions over the past century. That system is socialism. What they're actually offering is just more of the same. More taxes, more spending, more government, and less freedom. And as the president said 24 days ago, so we must say with one voice, America will never be a socialist country.
So we'll see if President Trump follows that similar path of trying to politically damage Democrats by trying to lump them all together under an umbrella of socialism, or if he decides to go the route of talking about more specific ideas and policy goals of this administration. Neil?
All right, Ellison, thank you very, very much. Let's get the read on all of this. And the Democrats are jumping into the race, including Bernie Sanders, who's going to eagerly tell his life story. The governor of Washington State entering the race. Joe Biden maybe later on next week. Beto O'Rourke maybe on next week. Most of them are of the view here that the government can and should do more, which means the spending can and should be more. CPA Dan Geltrude, of course, the karma guy, S&P Global Portfolio Manager Aaron Gibbs, and Fox News contributor Jonas Max Ferris. Jonas, who's resonating right now? Because to a man or woman, the distinction is they want the government to do more than certainly Donald Trump. So who's impacting whom?
Okay, this new element that's rising in the Democratic Party is getting all the attention, but the actual party, when they do polls, the Democratic Party actually wants to be more centrist. However, on Twitter, with the media, with the attention, it looks like everybody's behind AOC, and she's a big star, and she's driving a lot of attention.
But do your market pals worry about that message or no?
I don't think so, because there's no path for that to go anywhere, because the majority of people aren't for it. You're not going to, I mean, the socialism isn't going to take off with this low unemployment rate, the market high. There's too much good that people don't want to mess up. No one wants to rock a boat that severely. That said, it can drive you through. In fact, it might help because it'll get you through a primary, but then you're going to lose a general election because it's not moderate enough. The party's already having problems, although they're getting a lot of attention. They're starting priority tests and essentially putting people on lists, and it's getting very confrontational internally, and it's very difficult to be a moderate and climb now. But it's the moderates who would actually win and get policies that would increase taxes and spending, but at a level that is normal. Let's put it that way. The policies that are being thrown around now are not going to go anywhere because they're not going to ever win. They're never going to get the public behind them. They never get voted on. There's too many people that don't want to do those things.
But there's a general assumption that none of those candidates has a chance against the president built into that market premise. I can remember people saying the same about Donald Trump. I can remember people saying the same even about Ronald Reagan. I can remember Jimmy Carter folks hoping he would be the nominee because they could smash him like a bug. We know what happened.
Yes. And interestingly, that Jimmy Carter's election was the one election that had 17 Democratic primaries. And so that's the only time that we've seen this many candidates during the primaries.
In 76, not the one in 80.
Yeah.
Where his principal challenger was Ted Kennedy.
Exactly. So like that came after Watergate. So that was why there were just, so many candidates coming up. So I think, well, once we finally start seeing the Democratic primaries, some of the debates come through, maybe calmer heads might prevail. But to your point, yeah, I mean, it's the extreme values that are getting the media attention, the extreme proposals. And so until we really see all of them on the stage, we see all of the views, maybe then we can start to see more of the mainstream candidates that might really potentially win.
Incumbent in that argument, Dan, if you think about it, is a world that's different from the one we're living in. I mean, you would almost think this is the Depression. Instead, record low unemployment, record levels of jobs for almost all key demographic groups. The market's doing very well, corporate earnings doing very, very well. So I know there is this detachment sometimes that can exist in the mainstream media, and some people don't like the president, fine. But you can't really argue with the economic environment right now.
Yeah, you can't, and I think Jonas's point was right in terms of the economy is just too strong right now for socialism to grab hold. And I think if you look at this as all politics is local, look at what's going on with some of these states and how government is expanding and taxing, like New York, New Jersey, states like that. And what are you seeing? Migration of wealth. And it's not only just wealth, it's other people are migrating out of these states. And I think if the Fed gets in that place of where they're going to grow government, and it's going to be tax and spend, and we're going to start leaning towards socialism, although I don't think we're going there now. But at some point, if fortunes reverse, we can go that way. I think you're going to see an impact on the market, and you're going to see a migration of wealth accordingly.
Now, of course, Bernie Sanders' pitch, and he's going to have this event in New York City, is that you have not gotten a chunk of that. You have not been able to benefit from that. And that is his clarion call. The difference this time is that he has many more candidates echoing that theme, including many who weren't even born when he was first echoing it. What do you think?
Yeah, and I don't want to. Bernie Sanders started this whole thing. It's just that AOC is a more vibrant. I know you just mentioned a little while ago the parallels to Trump. The world could change in a year. We could be in a recession not our own fault, and all of a sudden these ideas could take hold. AOC is a very powerful, dynamic personality, and she could actually shift what is the average in the Democratic Party left. She's that kind of a Trumpian quality, even though we disagree with the policies and they're bad for the economy. That doesn't mean they're not going to. They couldn't take hold in a certain environment that could happen next year. But there's a lot of people running, and Bernie really did start this. And she, I believe, used to work for Bernie Sanders in his election. I just don't see right in the current.
That's right.
year.
I forgot that.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you're like, oh, we dismissed it a few years ago, but these ideas build and build, and then you get an audience behind it. All of a sudden, you're like, a few years later, you're like, what happened? We're having a 70% tax rate, and it's possible. But it also, I think plays into Trump because Trump, in some ways, is more centrist. Like he can beat a very far left candidate because his policies they're not really that extreme. A lot of them are populist. They were things that Democrats wanted to do with tariffs, and there were actually things so I think he is going to see more.
Yeah, he's concerned for American workers and the jobs aren't shipped overseas. That is more keeping with the union movement and Democrats than it's typically a Republican crowd. Aaron, do you think that the markets are hearing this, though, and not liking the direction, whatever the politics, that if it, we've got this record debt, it's to the point now where I think one party has called it a national security threat, Republicans, even though they've done little to address it. But that the worse this looks, the worse the prospects look for anyone advocating still more government.
there's certainly a concern, not right now when things are healthy, but that possibility that if we hit a recession and that risk, increases, that's when that gets to be a real concern. So if we're advocating more and more spending, that's when the deficit really becomes a bigger concern. And so, yeah, there's definitely a fear in markets that we want to get a hold of the, get the deficit a little more under control in case things go wrong. And yeah, so there's a fear out there.
All right, guys, thank you very, very much. By the way, we did get a tweet from the president, a sign that he's watching. He makes a note of the issue that Kim Jong-un took better than 2-day trip, a 3-day trip, according to the president, not the 2 hours that I believe I had mentioned. He is right about that. I did mean to say that it was a more onerous trip for the president to take because he had to fly halfway around the world, but the president is right to say that this guy taking a long train trip, just as bad. He had to do that is Kim Jong-un, because he didn't want to look like he had to borrow a plane from the Chinese to get there. Be that as it may, the president's watching, and I think he likes us. A little more after this.